So today I have the privilege and the pleasure of presenting to my Satrangi Rainbow listeners and watchers a very respected member of parliament, and her name is Ruby Sahota. She is an august parliamentarian, and she represents the constituency of Brampton North, Ontario. So I met Ruby Sota for about 1 year ago and found her a multi-dimensional personality. First thing which attracted me towards her was that she was and is honest, straightforward, upright, and she has the ability to deliver the goods. I encountered while visiting her office many applicants, many supplicants, and she tackled their problems very politely and effectively also. Uh, I can say that with certainty that Ruby Sohota is full of the milk of human kindness while conducting the meetings with the constituents. Thanks, Ruby Sohata, for your valuable time, which you have so kindly rendered to Satrangi Rainbow. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Pallan. No, I really want to say thank you for your time because I know that you were very patient in terms of scheduling this meeting, and I really appreciate and value all that you have brought to literature and language as well as journalism. So thank you for that.
thanks so much. And since 2015, Ruby, you have been an effective and eloquent voice of Brampton, working directly with the Prime Minister and other ministers, and through the thick of the things. And through your leadership, you have been focusing on many major priorities like public transit, post secondary education investments, and $10 a day childcare, reducing taxes, and making life more affordable for all Bramptonians. You are really, to my mind, playing a very significant, very paramount role for your constituency. So, my first question is that if you allow me to ask, that budget 2023 was tabled by the federal government just this past March. What affordability measures are being put in place to help every Canadian with the increased cost of living after COVID 19?
Yeah, so there were many measures in this budget, as well as even the fall economic statement. जो पिछले fall ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ table ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ. And I would say that, some people made comments about the grocery rebate, for example. Now, the grocery rebate has helped millions of Canadians, even though it doesn't help everyone. Many of our measures are measured by income, so they're income tested. And we want, especially now when things are tough with inflation, to help those that need it the most, right? So those that are on the lower end of things, so that we can make sure in our society people have are brought to a more standard level, and we don't have anyone falling through the cracks. So that is why we have measures like the grocery rebate for those that are on the lower end, why we have the seniors top up. But other programs like childcare is different. It is meant to support the majority of parents across this country so that we can see an economic boom as well, so that we can use the workforce that we have. We know we've seen in the last couple of years that there is a real skills shortage in certain areas. And we also know that many women at times have to take the back seat because they make a calculation, right, as to whose income is the most, who maybe naturally feels that they should be doing the caretaking at home, and many other factors that play into different families. And
Right.
so we've seen from lessons in Quebec that this can have a really great impact on the GDP. And we're already seeing that 6 provinces have been able, through our investments, to bring down daycare to $10 a month already. And
Right.
this was a goal that was supposed to be set out 5 years from now. So we're already reaching that goal. And in Ontario, we've already seen a 50% cut in rates. And that means affordability to the point where a parent, both parents can work, and they're also saving $700 a month after every child. So that's a big impact, and I think those types of measures are needed. But I know for the most part, what Canadians are looking forward to is inflation coming down again, because that it has driven up the cost of many items, especially groceries, is what I'm hearing in my constituency the most. Right, the daily things that they need.
Right.
So that is very important, and creating jobs in this budget was very important to us. So the investments that you're seeing are mostly in green technology, in ways that we can transition our economy now away from um, the resources that we were depleting, into renewable resources and more sustainable um, manufacturing for the future. And we're seeing big investments that we've been able to make, because of the funding that was put aside for battery manufacturing here in Ontario, for electric car manufacturing. And that has never happened here before. So I think those are good investments we've been able to get from international companies, picking Canada over many other countries to be able to call it home. And you know why they're saying that? Like, many people that you talk to in other countries and many companies, they know that Canada is rich in resources below the ground, but it's also rich in resources above ground, which means we have the manpower and the intellect amongst our population to be able to provide for these companies. And so I think we're going to see um, growth in these areas that we didn't expect, and we're winning out on deals that we would expect to lose to the US, because we have such a big market to compete with just south of our border. But I think we're seeing some positive signs, as well as I know that because of supply chain issues, because of the war in Ukraine, because of the after effects of COVID, there are some tough challenges that we're facing, but we're also seeing promising news. And we've seen growth in our GDP of 3% just recently, and those are good indicators.
Right, right. That would be a big service, and that would be a big contribution of your government for giving relief to all people who are really suffering after COVID-19.
Yeah,
So, my next anxiety is that about healthcare system, as
yeah,
everybody knows, and that our healthcare system, if you would allow me to say, that it is in a shambles. and
yeah,
uh, and I don't know why it is like that, but it is like that. So what is the
yeah.
federal government, is it working with the province to build it back on the real rails?
Yeah. So what has been disappointing for me is that there was a lot of talk when it came to the provinces demanding more money from the federal government, right?
Hmm.
So as a federal representative, I also advocated in favor of the provinces, because I also want to see more funding come to Ontario, so that it benefits my residents. However, once they got what they wanted in terms of funding, the conversation has gone away. But I think the conversation needs to continue still. I think we need to, the biggest investment of all time was just made by the federal government. It was agreed to by all the premiers across this country. And now we know that provincial healthcare or healthcare delivery is a responsibility of the province. So I think we can't forget to keep holding our province accountable to make sure that the delivery is done in the most effective, efficient way. There were a lot of conversations had about this with the prime minister and the premiers. And what we're seeing is, more and more money is getting spent, and they're coming to the federal government always asking for more. But are we being efficient and using proper technology that is available today to be able to service Canadians? And there was some controversy around the fact that, we were asking for healthcare data to be shared with the federal government. So, Mr. Pollan, today, the way it has been, we don't even know at the federal level how many doctors we have in certain provinces to service certain fields, how many nurses there are, how many patients are suffering from certain ailments or diseases, because that data is all stored with the provincial government. And I think it would be helpful for us to have a national database, for us to see what is working in some provinces, for us to have an integrated system where a patient can go from one doctor or one hospital to another and they don't have to reorder tests. They could just open the patient's file, which is universally available to all healthcare professionals, and they would be able to know what tests have already been done, 2 months ago, what those test results were, rather than have to wait and find out from the patient who their doctor was, what they had done, try to get those files transferred. That's what we're looking at right now. It's a very old-fashioned system.
Right.
And I think, we're trying to help move the provinces and drive them towards modernization. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of money in this, but in the funding that we've given to force them to modernize. And I think that will solve a lot of our problems, but also we need to work and push them to make sure they recognize credentials overseas of so many doctors that we have here right now that have potential to be able to either reskill, upgrade, or perhaps even seamlessly move right into our system, depending on their experience. And I think that is very important too. But of course, we have to maintain standards. We have to make sure communication is good between the doctors and the patients, and we need to make sure that preventative healthcare is there, because I find that right now we are causing problems not having healthcare at the front end, and that ends up with lots of complications, down the road. And so it's important, and I would urge you and your viewers to make sure they talk to their MPPs and say, as this funding continues to flow, what improvements are we going to see and what are the steps being taken? That's really important. Mental health is also a big issue for our youth. And really, honestly, I'm starting to see it in all ages, more and more of a concern.
Yes, that is Ruby really reassuring, and I hope that some tangible results will be in the offing. They will surface in the near
Yeah.
future. So,
Like we need a hospital here in Brampton, right? You probably hear that all the time, that
right,
we need
right,
not just Brampton Civic or Peel Memorial, but we need the third already built.
right.
And I would like that, but every time there's a federal election, the issue seems to come up, but the federal government doesn't decide where to build a hospital. The
Yes,
province decides, right? And so I think it's so important for our voters
right.
and Bramptonians to really understand how to apply pressure at the right time, the right way. When pressure needs to be applied to the federal government, it should be applied. When pressure needs to be applied to the municipality or the province, it should be applied. But what I'm finding that with many of my constituents, they oftentimes will say, well, no, we want to just come to the federal government to talk to you, and you should apply the pressure to all the different levels and get it done. And I understand, like, where their perspective might be coming from, but that's not always possible. That the province just going to always listen to the federal government and do whatever the federal government says. Only
Right.
if they have a concern from their voters will they do something, because they're going to say, what do you know? Why would we, if this is none of your business, this is not your jurisdiction, and just give us the money and then keep your nose out of it, right? So
Yes.
that is what we're seeing at times, but we have tried to push this and say, there's strings attached. We want to see results. You're only going to get continued funding if we see some results, but you too have to do your part of it. And by you, I mean the viewer, the listener, has to do their part and make sure they go to the right level of government for the right thing. Because in Canada, jurisdiction is practiced very differently than in India and many other countries. And the divide of jurisdiction is taken very seriously. And if you step into their jurisdiction, they will have a problem with it. They want to control what is constitutionally theirs, and I can understand that. But I think the voter should also understand that
Right.
Our province is very powerful.
I know that now your efforts will crown with success since you are working towards it very sincerely since long. So then the question which comes up in my mind is about the university. The university, which is much due, like there are universities like U of T is there, but York University is also there. But the Metropolitan University that is introducing medical school for the first time in Brampton, and
Yeah.
how are the different levels of the government they will be working together, and how the different level of government will cobble together to ensure that the project is being supported and it will definitely benefit Bramptonians. What is your opinion?
So education, schooling, universities, post-secondary is 100% provincial jurisdiction, 100%.
Right.
The decision is made by the province. A federal government shares in healthcare, shares a cost amount in
Yeah.
healthcare, and that's how the agreement came about. But in education, it's always been provincial. When the constitution was formed, the province has fought to
Right.
keep that jurisdiction. And so it really is a question for your provincial MPP. And I want to congratulate them for making the announcement on the Toronto Metropolitan University opening a med school here in Brampton. I'm really hoping that it happens. I'm hearing a lot of progress. I talk to Mohammed Lachmi regularly, who is the president of the university. We have been able to do some programs together in terms of funding for research and development. So the federal government does. It doesn't fund the bricks and mortar or the actual building of a university or approval of whether a university or how many seats for medical school should exist. The province decides how many seats, how many students are allowed across the province. However, once that university is approved and built, there are research grants and research that we provide for, so that that can help the betterment of overall the nation and for us internationally as well. So there are many types of development and research grants that we do provide through science and our STEM um, through our science ministry mostly, and innovation at times as well. So we're working with the university to see if things will get finalized with the province, if the province will build a school, and then once built, that we can help in its flourishment.
All right. By the way, how many seats you are looking at? So how many seats will
We're
be
not
made available?
Yeah, I could get you that information. I can't remember what Mohammed Lachmi said. I think the MPP would be the better person to ask. They approve how many seats are allowed,
Right, right.
according to them, how many they will allow, because they have a control over these things. So they would be the best person to ask.
Right,
But it's
right.
not going to be a big number. It's a medical school, so it's going to be
Yes,
it's going to
yes.
start with a very small number, and it might
Right,
grow
right.
over the year.
Of course,
Yeah.
it is like that. So, Ruby, I have come to know that IRCC, they are introducing some immigration programs. And what
Yeah.
are the latest updates about them?
Yeah, so IRCC has introduced a new type of Canadian Experience Class program. Perhaps that's what maybe you might be talking about. I think that early June is when Minister Fraser announced this new stream. It's a new way to evaluate
Right.
the skills that we have in our country here. So for students or others that come here and are either on a work permit and want to apply for PR, they will no longer now just get points for any type of education or any type of work experience. They will still have a small category where they do the regular general stream, but they're making these specialized streams because they want to link those streams to our labor needs. And so students that, for particular, there's a list that you can go on IRCC's website and check. I believe it's if I'd have to go on and check right now. I believe it's 38 or something like that, but there's a whole bunch of different jobs listed.
Right.
And if the education that you have, or the job skills and qualifications that you experience that you have, would qualify for that job, then you would get enough points basically to apply for PR. So there's a whole bunch of jobs in
Right.
medical. There's a whole in healthcare, basically long-term
Right.
care, nursing. There's many job descriptions, engineering, software, and hardware like development, um, and a couple of other categories. I believe there's five categories, and there's jobs in all five categories. So I would urge students and those that are listening to take a look at those jobs and do courses that qualify you for that type of a job, because you will have a much easier time getting PR. And I think this is good because the biggest complaint, Mr. Paul, and I used to get in my office is that we have a skills mismatch, right? We have a
Okay.
lot of people coming in that say they can't find a job, and then we have our economic chambers and like board of trades that are telling us across the country that they cannot find employees.
Right.
So this used to boggle my mind. I'm like, you can't find employees, but I meet people who say they have a degree in whatever it is and from university and they can't find a job, right?
Right.
And so this will at least help immigrants understand better that the area jobs are in, but it also means that this program is going to have to adapt very quickly because jobs will change, fields will change. So this is conversations I'm having with the immigration minister to make sure that they don't make this program, but they react quickly and make it adaptable so they continue to change the areas. Because if we just keep the areas the same, then we're going to have a flood of people just in
Right.
those areas,
Right.
and then
Right.
eventually we'll have a saturation and overflow in that area, right? So
Yes.
we'll have to constantly be monitoring.
So you are churning out project after project, which are really wonderful also, and they are reassuring also, and they do a lot for the
Well,
Bramptonians.
we had a very busy session this session.
Yes.
I'm the deputy whip of the party, and in this session we had 15 weeks of parliament, and in 15 weeks we passed 15 bills.
Good. Good.
So that is, I mean, that doesn't mean one bill only takes 1 week. It means all those bills started, months and months ago. And by the end, by the time we rose last Thursday, we were able to have passed 15 bills this session. And so it was a busy one. I don't think you'll find many parliaments around the world, or any legislature here in Canada that is able to pass that much legislation. And we did it with a minority government.
Right. 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 And since you are addressing so many issues which are plaguing our Bramptonians projects, and then there is the transit fund, that is zero emission transit fund, and
Yeah.
by that you want to electrify all the Brampton transit fleets. Can you
Yeah.
please provide some details what it means for Bramptonians who use the public transit?
For Bramptonians, I think it would be a sense of pride because we're one of the first cities to have taken this step. And I know that many people often ridicule Brampton, and a lot of times that happens even in Brampton, right?
Right.
Bramptonians often say Brampton is not, is behind. Brampton needs to do, this or the other. And I hear a lot of that negativity sometimes. But Brampton is a leader in the world right now in
Right.
terms of
Right.
electrification of their bus fleet. So I think it's something to be very proud of.
Because
It's
of your
something we
outstanding
haven't.
efforts. It is just
Yeah,
because of your outstanding efforts. You have been
so
depositing a
we
lot of.
have a plan.
Yeah.
We have a plan with the Liberal government to, put money into these areas that are going to have a good impact on the long term of our health, our environment, and even the sound pollution is less if you hear with an electric bus, right? And so there's a few that you see on the streets nowadays. You're seeing those overhanging chargers that come down on the street and charge the bus. But we will be announcing a new bus facility as well that is going to be the main hub for all the electric fleet. So the money has been accounted for, and slowly you're going to see all of Brampton transit from their diesel buses into all electric buses. So this will be a phased project because obviously they're not going to replace their new buses right away. They're
Yeah.
going to phase them out as buses get old, and we're going to continue to see more and more new buses. Infrastructure projects like this, because it involves the charging, and transit falls under our infrastructure portfolio, are usually shared one third with the province, the federal government, and the municipality. But in this project, it was only the federal government that supported the municipality and Brampton Transit's vision, because we do think this is going to be good for our future development here in the city, and to be able to keep our environment healthy. I know that the city councilors care a lot about that too. So we've had a good partnership with the city.
So eventually, it is going to be pollution free transport system here. This is what I hope.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It started, and I think in the years to come, you're going to see more and more, and it will eventually be. And it has a big impact on CO2 emissions across the country as well. So we have to be leaders. I know many times people will say, well, why are we doing anything when there are other big polluters around the world? I think that's the wrong approach. Per capita, we do consume a lot of energy here in Canada, and we do contribute a lot in emissions per person. We're one of the worst.
Mhm.
And that's probably because we live in a cold climate and lots of other things. But if we want to internationally be taken seriously as leaders on climate, then we have to act first ourselves, and lead the way. And slowly, we are also seeing that companies are coming on board, so many, right? And it's creating a lot of new jobs and new technology. Many companies are way ahead, even with like the plastics ban we put in place. We
Yeah.
already saw that grocery stores were already taking those steps before any bans or the legislation even came into effect. So it's good to see, and there are many other countries too that have been taking good steps. But we all need to work together to reduce our emissions in many ways. This won't be the only way. This is
Right.
just one part.
Right. Right. So there is a emission target, zero emission target by 2050,
Yeah.
and that would resolve so many climate crisis issues. And what is your government, federal government, currently doing about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're hearing a lot of, talk out there about the price on pollution, the price that, I really want to explain this as well, because I feel it's been twerked, and people have a little bit of a misunderstanding as to what the government is trying to do with putting a price on pollution.
All right.
Uh, the reason a price on pollution is put there, this price is charged to big polluters, to companies, right? And yes, companies will at times, you know, move that cost down to the consumer.
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing a lot of people saying, this is a tax on us because the company is pushing that cost down to the consumer. Not all companies are, but some do. And then the consumer gets frustrated. So what we're trying to do is, in order to protect the consumer or make the consumer whole, we are giving the incentive. In your tax return, you may have recently seen, just the last couple of weeks, that you got a check in the mail through CRA, and it probably assessed you and said, whether you're eligible for $700 or something like that in the next year, and that you would get that in different payments. So that's your carbon tax, carbon incentive that you're getting back, so that those costs that some companies are putting on you are given back to you. So there's been a calculation done as to the average cost that a Canadian would have to face because of this. And we calculated that, and now we're trying to give that back. However, if we don't move forward with this, then there's not a conscious decision that people will make to change their behavior, right?
Yeah.
The other
Right.
thing that we want to do is make sure people make certain decisions to start changing their behavior,
Right.
to move on to an electric vehicle, to reduce their energy costs in other ways, right? And there's different incentives given even for windows and other renovations that you can do, such as solar energy and all of those things that are also given by the government. So we want to change people's behaviors so that we have better results in the long term. This is a long process, though,
Right.
to do that. And but economists and environmentalists have told us that this is really the best way to change behavior. If you say you're going to reward someone to change their behavior, it's much slower process than if you um, make sure that there's a penalty for the companies that are polluting. And when they know there's a penalty as well, they start changing their technologies.
Right.
So they're emitting less, right? And we're already seeing that. Many companies, when they know it's their bottom dollar, when they know it's going to cost them something, they will figure out new ways to make profit and to save money and to change their ways so they're not emitting as much pollution. So that is a part of our goal to get to net zero.
Right. Right. So I think that that is a plus point that you are percolating all the benefits to the consumers, to the end users. So that would be very beneficial for them. Uh,
Well, it's another way to maybe to help, like you were saying, like relieve, because we know there are costs to some of these things associated to try to give back to the average person, so the cost is not on them, but the
right.
cost continues to be on the companies. And I think it's so important. It's the most biggest issue of our time
Right. Right.
for our children. If you talk to children, they're very worried about this. They're very
Yes.
concerned because they know maybe you and me
Mm.
will be okay, but they know that they'll suffer the
Mm.
consequences of inaction. And we're already seeing it with forest fires. We're seeing visual effects of climate change right now. The amount of forest fires we're having is unusual. It's not, we never used to have so many, and they never used to last so long. So the dryness, the change in climate is causing that, when there is a lightning storm or some type of incident and there is a fire, which is, something that happens, it's happening more now and it's traveling further, the fire, and it's harder to control. And that's all due to our climate changes that we're having in our environment.
Right. 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 And Ruby, there are like problems after problems which are like coming up, and they are surfacing my mind also. And then there is another crisis, that is a
Mhm.
national housing crisis. And
Yes.
many young Canadians feel, as you know, that buying a home first time, is it possible
Yeah.
in this economy, which is very it's the crying need of the people, that, and they are thinking in day and out, that how will it be possible
Yeah.
for a person to buy a house in such type of critical economic situation. Can you please?
Yeah, I agree with you that housing is becoming a crisis here in our country. I think the biggest issue here is supply. We need to continue to build supply of homes in our country, in all sorts of different homes of different sizes. For a while, the trend was to only build, detached. Especially in our area where I represent, the attraction was to buy bigger and bigger, and not on transit lines, not places where you can easily commute from one place to another, but what a lot of municipalities were just moving towards was suburban sprawl, just far spreading,
Mm,
where you always have to drive with a car to get somewhere. And I think municipalities are starting to change their vision a little bit. We do have incentives as a federal government to provide to municipalities. That was also in our last budget, so that if they more they build, there will be federal incentives. There's also incentives that, if housing is built um, next to a transit line, all of that stuff, there are more federal infrastructure dollars to provide for those types of projects.
mm,
But housing is a shared jurisdiction and it's not really federal. We have stepped in a little bit to provide some affordable housing units. That's the first. We're the only government in the history of Canada that has, like, the Harper government didn't pay for affordable housing. Nobody thought housing was a federal responsibility. So there are some measures that we've taken also to prevent foreigners from buying homes here or disincentivizing them from buying here, and that helps a little bit. The first time home buyers incentive for young buyers, that helps a little bit. But I think what's going to have the biggest impact is supply, and the more supply the municipality can approve to
Yes.
build, that will be a good thing. But I'm also hearing from many builders and unions that they have a shortage of construction workers, and it's a mass shortage even for heating and plumbing. I'm hearing in the next 5 years, so much of their workforce is retiring that they're going to have a shortage of 70,000 employees.
Right. Right.
So these are huge problems for our
Yes.
times right now. And I know people say that, okay, well, we need to stop immigration. We need to figure out a way um, to keep the housing supply that we have. But I think we just need to build more faster, really,
Right.
because we also need to fill the people retiring.
Right.
And we know that Canadians right now are not going into those trades, right? They're
Right.
not going into school to figure out how to be a bricklayer or figure out how to be a welder or a heating repair and plumber and all of those things that you need to build housing. And so we do need to make sure we continue to bring those skills in because our population is aging.
Right.
And I think people really need to understand that. We need to
Yes.
take care of our seniors, and we're not going to be able to take care of our seniors if we don't have nurses, if we don't have hospitals. And what we saw in Atlantic Canada is hospitals are shutting their doors because they don't have workers. Their
Yes.
population is very old if you go to Atlantic Canada. And
Yes.
slowly now, they're seeing finally some youth come in because of the international student program. So it's funny. Their perspective is very different on international students
Yes.
in
Yes.
that area than it is here because we have different challenges. Um, we have more coming in this than in this area than probably needed, and in those areas they need more. So I would encourage those that are looking to make a home in Canada that they study these things, get really knowledgeable about what jobs are needed here, and what areas to settle in because there's a real shortage in some places in the country.
I appreciate your vision, which is far-sighted, and I'm sure that it will yield some fruitful results. So that leads me to another question, and that is again, you have been dousing so many fires, like so many crises you have been resolving. Then there is another fire, that is wildfire. How can you support what measures you are taking to fight those wildfires across Canada?
Yeah, so I was having this conversation with someone recently, and they were asking. The U.S. has been supporting us. Canadian firefighters across the country have been supporting and helping, and I want to thank all those frontline workers, all those firefighters that for almost little pay to many that are volunteers. Mr.
Mhm.
Pollard, I don't know, many of Canadian firefighters in this country are volunteers. And many municipalities cannot pay firefighters. They have no budget for that. So
Yes.
it's just community volunteers that train to be firefighters and they do it on their spare time. So there are many noble people here in this
Right.
country that
Right.
are on the front lines fighting to help solve those issues. But we also have international support. And this isn't anything to be embarrassed about or to be surprised about, because I did have a few people ask me questions about this. These are agreements that have been made through many Western countries.
Yes.
Uh, we also send fire support to France, to the US, to all across the world as well, because there are pacts made between countries. Because you don't need that many firefighters on hand all year long. It doesn't make sense to have all of that support within your own country. So there are associations that have been built so that when there are forest fires like this in California, or we had recently in France and Germany, then our firefighters go there to help
Right.
and
Right.
support,
Right.
and vice versa. When we have the timing in our calendar where this ends up happening, they come here. And so I think it's a good partnership we've built internationally.
Yes.
And so we are getting a lot of support to get it under control. And I think we're also seeing that we're not uh, smelling the effects of the forest fire as much as we were before. But even though we're not, there are other parts of the country that still are. So it's a continued effort.
All right. And the idea which you are presenting about the reciprocation of the values and reciprocation of the efforts,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, in California, from California to California, because there are so
Yeah.
many
South
wildfires over
Africa.
there also.
Yeah, South Africa, we also had support from South Africa. And so I want to thank all those countries as well.
Yeah,
And they know that Canada will be there for them too
right,
whenever there is natural disaster of this type.
right, right. So, Ruby, you have recently, I was reading the newspapers. In the newspapers, the international students,
Yes.
they have been suffering and they have faced so many problems, and just none of their fault. And you did a very wonderful job in helping them and easing their pressures, because there was that a fraudulent behavior of a person who landed them in trouble, and they were really upset about that. And you did really a very significant job, and kudos to you. I appreciate your efforts, and you provided relief and help to those international students, and helped them stay here. Otherwise there was that deportation and so many other factors, they were hanging heavy on their mind. So, to my mind, not only that it has relieved them, but also you have created a new dimension that the South Asians, or for that matter, anybody who is suffering, and just because of some indecent and illegal activities, so you are there to help them out. So I really appreciate that gesture. And further to that, is there some legal method which you are cracking on to crack on them, so that these things don't repeat, and these things don't become a repetitive fraudulent measure by those people who are by vested interests, you can say. So what
Yeah.
are your efforts on the Fed level?
So I've met with most of the students that are of the greater Toronto area that were protesting here um, a few weeks or about a week or 2 weeks before the protesting had even started. But that was the first I had really met with them. I
Right.
think there was a little bit of for some reason they were hesitant to really approach their members of parliament at first.
Yeah.
I know that I heard that some students were going to Jacuzzi Park,
Mhm.
or some and after the fact I heard about some of these events and that some had gone to Toronto to protest. Well, I think it's always important to make sure whatever area you're living in, to bring these concerns to your local representative depending on what level the issue is at. I think there's lots of concerns students still need to bring to the provincial level about the schools they're going to, because there are a lot of complaints about how many schools are opening up and what these schools are providing, what type of support they're providing students. So I think students should be very vocal on that. This task force that's been created is going to really deeply look into that stuff. And I think, Mr. Pallan, even in the fall, you're going to hear some other big announcements from our government
Right.
as to how we can start fixing this problem, because some of it is in the provincial jurisdiction, but we're having talks with them because a lot needs to change. I agree that a lot needs to change about this program. And for the students that were affected, basically they're being given another opportunity from a
Yes.
different lens to present their case,
Right.
to show whether they had the intention to study here in Canada and if they did study. So those that actually, came to one school were told, by that school that they couldn't find their name on the register, or whatever, and that they should contact their agent. That is the scenario that happened in most students' cases. Then they contacted their agent, and a lot of times the story is that the agent then told them, "Don't worry about it. That school is just overbooked. We'll find you another school."
Right.
And so some of them, a lot of the ones I had spoken to didn't realize that that was a part of the fraud. They just thought, "Oh, the school is over." Like they thought that was normal, and they didn't realize that they were never enrolled in the first school
Right.
at all, and they shouldn't have come on that letter. And so the ones that did get into another school after, because they had the legitimate qualifications of English scores, and they had their previous studies in India and completed their studies in Canada. I think from those students we can see that they came to study. They did study. Some of them are on a postgraduate work permit right now, or just finishing their education. Some were actually eligible to apply for PR at this time. It's a very small number we have right now. It was at 50 something students
Right.
across Canada. CBSA and IRCC believe, from looking and reviewing all their files again, that there could be 300 at the end of the day that have gone through something similar. And it's also their assessment that maybe half of those students were innocent and not involved in the fraud.
Right.
So not everyone gets to stay. That's important too.
Yes. Yes.
If a student came on a fake letter and it's found out through some conversations or emails that they were involved in the fraud, they do not get to stay. They will be deported. If they also didn't study here, they went on and they got married or went to go work, or no one heard from them since then, they will also be found and deported. So many students that may have come under this type of a situation, many of them will be deported, but the ones that did study, we're finding a solution for them so they can stay, continue their work, get the points that they need, hopefully, to apply for PR. They'll also have to apply for PR too, though. All that will happen through this process is they will be given an equal chance to every other student that
Right.
also studied and worked here, and they will be eligible, or they'll be given the opportunity to apply for PR if they have the points required, if they have the experience required, and they're eligible. Also, what's really good news is the agent that you were talking about. There's more than one agent involved in this type of scam, but one of the most popular agents, Mr. Mishra, was recently arrested
Yes. Yes.
by CBSA, and I think it was very gutsy of him to be hiding here in Canada
Yeah.
after having done this, because it allowed us and it allowed our CBSA agents to now arrest him, because we have jurisdiction in Canada,
Right.
and charge him on criminal charges.
Yeah.
Um, so, this is the penalty. Canada is not going to tolerate abuse of our system and those that are defrauding innocent people in the process. And they also defrauded our system, right? And they defrauded or ruined our reputation as well, in terms of this. So I think, I'm really glad that he got arrested. And there may be other agents around the world that are not in Canada. So we don't necessarily have jurisdiction, but I would also plead that, we can do so much. We can try to educate more, and we will. We'll do our part. We'll try to educate people over abroad what to look for, how to apply, all of those things. But I would also ask authorities in all of those other countries that students come from to try to protect their population, to try to protect their citizens as well, so this doesn't happen to them in the future, right? And hopefully they get charged in their home countries, all of the other agents that were involved in this type of stuff.
Right. And I, in fact, am really grateful to you because you felt the pulse of those suffering students, and you addressed the issue in a very, very generous, very genuine, and very compassionate manner. And that is the whole key of the problem, by which the problem has been solved by your efforts,
Yeah.
by your sincere efforts. And I also feel that those students who were the victims of that fraudulent behavior of one person, of one indecent person, the students were, to my mind, they were more sinned against than sinning, and
Mhm.
you helped them come out of that situation, that plight, and that predicament. And as a journalist, I am grateful to you for that, your sincere
Thank
efforts.
you.
That speaks
I know that.
volumes of your compassionate and generous thinking about
Yeah.
those matters, which those matters which matter most to most of the people.
Yeah,
So
I think there was a divide in our communities
yeah,
as to those that supported the students and those that were not in support of them. But I do also urge for those people to really understand their situation a little bit better. And when they talk to the students, like I had many interviews with the students, and then you will understand a little bit better how this was possible
yeah,
to achieve. And you will have compassion and you will have sympathy. And to me, it wasn't about how what kind of benefit I will get out of this. It was more about doing the right thing
yeah,
for students, regardless of this if this is a disadvantage to me at the end of the day or a benefit. I don't know really, but I think always doing the right thing when you're in a position to help is what you should do. And I'm grateful for the ability to be able to help some of these students.
so nice, really. It was a noble gesture. So, in the end, I would like to record my gratefulness to you, Ruby, that you have been very kind and for giving this interview, for being with us for some time, and your precious time, even now, like it is about 9 o'clock. Still, you are giving support to the Bramptonians by your interviews. That is, you are helping them in so many ways. Otherwise, this is a good time for taking rest for a person like you who has been working assiduously and since 2015. Uh, and I pray that you continue moving forward and build a better future, not only for Bramptonians, but for all Canadians. I thank
Yeah.
you very much, and I wish you a long life. And since we depend on you, your mighty help, since you know what are the issues and how to address them and how to address them properly. So thank you so much. I have like deep gratefulness for you. Thanks very much, Ruby Sota.
Thank you, Mr. Paul, I appreciate your time as well. I think for me to be able to, share this platform with you is a real honor, and I'm grateful you agreed to do this even in the late hours. And I want to say that I hope I can have a little bit of an impact on changing someone's life here in Brampton or across this country, and continue to give me feedback through your watchers, your listeners, your viewers, whatever feedback that you get. Please don't ever hesitate to share that feedback with me, because even critical and negative feedback is good feedback. It makes us a better representative. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Ruby.